To introduce a man who's not only standing up for Labour values in Parliament, but standing up for the South West as well. Whether the weak and wobbly Prime Minister will survive a few more months or a few more years, I know that the man I'm introducing next will be our next Labour Prime Minister. Conference, please join me in welcoming Corbyn.
Thank you very, very much, Luke, for that fantastic introduction. And could I just say thank you, all of you, for all the work you do for the party. And what a great evening we had last night talking to members of the party in Plymouth and talking to them about the campaigning they do in this wonderful city that has achieved so much and given so much to the whole country, yet at the same time suffers so much insecure employment and so much poverty. And the work that Luke and others are doing to defend jobs and pointing out that the cuts that the government is now making in defence mean that the great work done in saving lives in the Caribbean and in the Mediterranean by the Royal Marines is put at risk by these kind of cuts that are taking place. And so what Luke is doing as the MP for this city and all of you are doing in the run-up to the council elections is part and parcel of the campaign to raise the consciousness of the whole nation that this government, its strategy and its policies cannot go on, and it's time to make way for Labour to govern in the interests of the people of this country. And in thanking you all for coming and welcoming you here today, and thanking you all for being so kind to me on my visits to Devon, Cornwall, Somerset, Devon and Dorset and all the other parts across the region, I want to say a big personal welcome to Pam Galloway, who's here this morning. I met Pam for the first time last night. She was bragging about her youth, and I told her to not be so intemperate when she's so young. She's 95, has been in the Labour Party all her life, a committed socialist all her life, and in the small village she lives in mid-Devon, she told me she was for a long time probably the only Labour Party member and the only Labour voter. But I'm pleased to say there are now many, many more of them. Pam, thank you for coming this morning, and thank you for doing so much for us. Now that she's suitably embarrassed, we can move on. In thanking Luke for his work, I also want to really compliment and welcome the other two newly elected MPs in the general election. That's my old friend David Drew, who won Stroud back for Labour in the general election. The only job I could think of for David immediately, and he's doing it brilliantly, was to be the Shadow Minister dealing with rural affairs and developing rural policies for the whole of Britain, because the message has got to go out there. Yes, we are a party with huge support in the big cities of this country, but you might live in a chocolate box type village. You might live in a totally beautiful area of the country. You still will be poor under this government. You will still need bus services, social services, education, health and all those things. And David is taking that message out there, that the policies of rural Britain matter as well. And I want to compliment Darren Jones on winning Bristol North West, and Bristol, such a wonderful city where Labour has done so well and gained so much support. We need a government that delivers for the people of Bristol and doesn't slash their budgets in the way that this government is doing. And I want also to thank our MEP for the South West, Claire Moody. I'm quite convinced that there is... Anyone dare saying there's only one Claire Moody, because wherever I go across the southwest, she is there, standing up for Labour in the most unlikely and unusual places. She's always there, speaking up for the party and speaking up for social justice values. Claire, thank you very much for everything you do. I can confirm she's doing the other part of the job extremely well, because whenever I go to Brussels, she's also there. Thank you, Claire, for so much of what you do. Our MPs, all of the MPs for the region, including those that were re-elected, and I compliment them all on that, standing up for socialism, standing up for their communities in Parliament to make sure that the voices of the people of this region are heard. Plymouth is a great venue for the conference, and I'm delighted to be here. I had a lovely run down to the Hoe this morning and look at the breakwater and the whole vista of this beautiful city. But it's a beautiful city which we have to make sure we win the council elections in, but also we win in this constituency and make sure it's a Labour gain in the next general election. And in complimenting Phil and all his team, in the recent general election, the South West was in fact the region where we made the biggest gains in percentage terms. We increased our vote all across the South West by 73%. And that incredible increase in our vote is down to your hard work and the hard work of all of our activists who have given their time and their effort and their energy to spread our message of a fairer and decent society. That general election unleashed a feeling of hope and optimism amongst the people of this country that it doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to live in such a grotesquely unequal society. We don't have to pass by on the other side while people are sleeping rough on our streets because a government that can't be bothered to invest in the needs of the poorest and instead would rather protect the tax havens of the richest. That is the Labour message. We're here for everybody in our society. We will not pass by on the other side and ignore those that are suffering so much. The increased vote shows that we didn't just make 3 important gains from the Tories, but also had some very near misses. This constituency, Plymouth Marjon, Gloucester, Swindon, Camborne and Redruth, we can and I believe we will win in those constituencies and we'll take the fight elsewhere. Or places such as Filton and Bradley Stoke and Bournemouth, where we can win for the first time in our party's history. And anyone that says these Tory iconic names like Bournemouth are unwinnable, I tell you this, we did a members' mobilisation, as I damaged the platform here, a members' mobilisation event in Bournemouth. The hotel didn't have a room big enough for us to have the event in, and so a whole lot of people assembled on the pavement outside, and so in true Labour inclusion matters, we opened the curtains, opened the windows and pointed the loudspeakers out for the whole world to hear our message. Well done, Bournemouth Labour, well done in what you're doing. And then we took a walk amongst the palm trees on the front and thousands more people turned up, because they know that with Labour there is hope for the future. So we're going to advance all across the region, and I want to thank you for all the work that you all do in the party to achieve this. It shows that our arguments for a more equal and more democratic society have traction in every single part of Britain. And at times in our past, Labour has too often been seen as a party of the north, whilst the Tories and Lib Dems have laid claim to the south. But as a leader who was born in Wiltshire, born in the South West, I'm really proud that we're witnessing such a massive Labour revival across this region. The Labour Party will be with you at a national level in supporting all your campaigns all across the South West. We need to get the message out there that we can win. And I saw for myself quite recently how we are reaching out in other places. I was visiting Glastonbury for the second time this year to open some housing that Michael Eavis had inspired to be built, called Margaret Bonfield Close, after the first Labour woman cabinet minister in 1929, who was also formerly USDOR Assistant General Secretary. So I'm very proud to open those properties, and also thank Michael Eavis and all those at Glastonbury for the support they've given to that local community. And it was wonderful to meet comrades from the local party in Wells and other places, and they showed me the work they're doing. Incredible. And in the evening, we went to Barnstable to do a Labour rally. Now, just think about this. Barnstable Labour rally. It was only me and Billy Bragg, nobody else there. 700 people turned up, and we talked about the history, the Labour history of the area, the history of ordinary people's struggles, but also about that sense of unity and hope of people. And they wanted to hear about it, they wanted to be part of it. So thank you, North Devon, for all the work you do in the campaigning you're doing. Because there is this vibrant radical tradition all across the region. After all, it was Tolpuddle in Dorset where those 6 brave agricultural labourers formed an then illegal friendly society, and in so doing started trade unionism in this country. And that annual celebration at Tolpuddle is something magnificent because it shows that in the most difficult circumstances, very brave people stepped up to challenge the power of the wealthy in order to found trade unions, and look what's happened all over the world as a result of their bravery. And it was in Bristol that the bus boycott took place in 1963 against a bus company employing only white drivers, and paved the way for the Race Relations Act, outlawing racial discrimination in public places. Again, it was the bravery of people in Bristol and the black community in Bristol who stood up, and that in turn inspired the first race relations legislation in Britain. Our social progress, our rights, come from the struggles of ordinary people, often in very difficult circumstances. So we say thank you to all of them for all we did, and we carry the torch forward into the next generation. That is what we're doing. I mentioned Glastonbury and the way in which, to me, it was an amazing experience being there, highlighting the hope and inspiration of our movement that young people across Britain and older young people across Britain are so excited by. The South West is also a region that returned some of the most pioneering MPs in the Labour Party's history. Michael Foot in this very city of Plymouth, Stafford Cripps in Bristol, and of course the late Tony Benn, also in Bristol. But I want also to follow what Fran said this morning in paying tribute to Candy Atherton. I knew Candy very well from her time in CND, her time at Greenham, where we're trying to work out whether she met my late mother or not. We've decided she probably did, and since neither of them are around to challenge us, it's okay. And also her work as a local councillor in the borough that I represent of Islington, where she also became mayor. And what she did for this region was to, first of all, outrun Sebastian Coe, as she frequently reminded me of. She said she was actually fitter than Sebastian Coe. She had a great sense of humour. And the way in which she stood up for the region and forced the then government to accept, and the EU to accept, Objective 1 funding status for the South West, which meant a large amount of European Union investment came in, which helped to fund universities, quite possibly the very university we're in today. And it was her work that was so important in achieving that. And so she was there at Labour Party conference in 2015 when her wheelchair memorably got stuck on the platform, and it was freed by John McDonnell and myself. Who says we're not a great team working together to free each other in places of adversity? But also, she was there at Heartlands in August with John Ashworth and myself, speaking up for health services and health care and social care and mental health services all across this region. So in her memory, let's make sure we win Falmouth back for Labour, okay? If we are to form a Labour government, we have to make more gains, and we have to make gains across the South West to make sure that the area is represented, but also that we get that majority in Parliament to form a Labour government. If there's ever a reason why people should vote Labour, I would have thought it was listening to Philip Hammond on Wednesday. The budget announced on Wednesday was a grim expose of the economy's failure under the Tories and why a Labour government is so badly needed. The government's attempts to paper over the cracks of a failing economy with gimmicks and clever accounting shows just how weak and short of ideas they really are. The beleaguered Chancellor, claiming to be presiding over a strong economy, the reality is a litany of failure. Economic growth revised down. Productivity growth down. Business investment down. Wages down. And real wages are now less than they were 10 years ago. Living standards down. And we were all told in 2010 that austerity would solve our economic woes and that selling off the NHS bit by bit was essential to help the economy recover. Old people have gone without social care. Children have suffered in their cuts in their schools and education that they deserve. Families having to survive on poverty wages, all on the pretense that suffering was necessary for a strong economy. They promised they'd get rid of the deficit by 2015. They then apologised and promised we'd get rid of it by 2016, and then 2017, then 2020, and now they're talking about 2025. I used to make a joke that one thing that was certain about the Tories' 5-year economic plan for recovery was always 5 years away. It's now 10 years away. And yet they're so stuck in their outdated neoliberal economic dogma, they cannot see the wood for the trees. They refuse to accept that cutting public services, holding wages down, and refusing to invest is a recipe for failure. And it isn't just about the numbers on a spreadsheet in the Treasury. It's an economic failure that has real impact on people's lives. It is this total disinterest in the needs of working people which characterises how the Tories operate. They've allocated more money for Brexit preparations than they have for the National Health Service. They've allocated no extra money for education apart from a trifling figure for maths, resulting in more real terms cuts and a continuation of the recruitment crisis in the teaching profession, as head teachers desperately try to raise money in order to keep their schools going in modern Britain, the 6th richest country in the world. No extra money for the police, who have lost 20,000 officers since this lot came into office, or for the fire service, who have lost 8,000 firefighters in England alone. They've made no commitments whatsoever to help out councils through local government funding, who've had their direct funding slashed by 80%, which means there's no more money to solve the crisis in social care, where over $6 billion has been cut will have been cut by March 2018. Those cuts are real, and as I pointed out to some Tory MPs who seemed to have difficulty understanding these matters, when you cut social care, it means that somebody who's had good treatment in a hospital but is ready to go home but doesn't have anybody to care for them at home needs social care support. It means that social care support is not there. The choices then become pretty limited. Either that person remains unaccountably a long time in hospital when the bed is clearly needed by somebody else and there's then a sort of moral pressure on them, or a family member, nearly always a woman, has to give up their job, give up their career, put their life on hold in order to care for an elderly relative. Surely, in modern Britain, we can do a bit better than that and apply the principles of our National Health Service to the National Care Service that a Labour government will introduce. This failing, unjust, unequal economy denies everybody in our society the opportunities they could otherwise have. But it does, of course, hit the poorest more than anyone else. A report released last week by the UK Communities Foundation found, and I found this figure astonishing, that 45% of the children in Newquay and over 50% of the children in parts of Bristol are living in poverty. This is a staggering figure in the 6th richest country in the world, and highlights why we need transformative change to our economy and our society as a whole. We have 7.4 million people, including 2.6 million children, stuck in poverty, despite living in households where somebody is in work. This is in-work poverty in modern Britain. We have National Health Service nurses being forced to visit food banks because they're so badly paid. Just think about that. NHS nurses using food banks in order to survive. Pay for most people is now lower than it was in real terms before the financial crash of 2008. This is the only major developed economy in which pay has fallen despite growth returning. And here in the southwest, pay has fallen by an average of £1,500. It's frankly astonishing that anybody could have the cheek to claim we have a strong economy when most people are losing out and not gaining in income at all. And it's not just us, not just the Labour Party that's saying that. The Institute of Fiscal Studies now warns that because of the government's budget and poor economic performance, wages could still be below their 2008 level in 2022, in 5 years' time. And there's more. The Office of Budget Responsibility forecasts reveal that somebody on an average income will lose out £2,257 over the next 5 years because of the poor performance of our economy. On an annual basis, that means that in 21-22, an average worker will lose £858 compared to the last forecast done in March, and we're now in November. To put it another way, for the last 3 weeks of the financial year, everybody on the national living wage in Britain will effectively be working for free as they're denied the earnings previously expected. As the OBR says, it is workers who have to bear the brunt of the government's poor management of the economy. Despite all the evidence, the Tories refuse to accept that cutting public services, holding down wages and refusing to invest is a recipe for failure. The government cannot continue to tinker at the edges of an economy that is so obviously and so completely broken. Our country needs a new and very different approach, and that's exactly what Labour is offering, with our fully costed programme for government, which will genuinely transform people's lives right across society. We'll scrap the public sector pay cap, giving teachers, nurses and public servants the pay rise they deserve. Pause and fix universal credit to stop it driving people into debt and poverty. Those people losing their homes because they're on universal credit, those estate agents, those letting agents sending letters out, giving people preemptive notices to quit because they're going on to universal credit. This, in modern Britain, we have got to do better. And we can. So we will introduce a real living wage of at least £10 an hour by 2020. And we will reverse the Tories' tax giveaways and clamp down on tax avoidance. Tax avoidance starves our hospitals and our schools of the money that they need. There's nothing clever about avoiding tax. There's frankly something immoral about it when you realise the effect it has on tax and we invest in infrastructure, new technologies and our people in every region and nation of the UK to create an economy that works for the many, not the few. Luke has explained the need for investment across the southwest in the railway system. I absolutely support and endorse that. And we have to go a lot further in order to regenerate the economy all across the southwest. It needs strong transport links to the rest of the country in order to develop. And John McDonnell made it very clear that he as Chancellor will put the money in to upgrade the railway system all across the southwest. Flowing of money directly into the pockets of the very richest, which is being accelerated by the government's approach towards Brexit. Although the Tories are bungling the actual Brexit negotiations, there are no doubt they're using the shock of us leaving the EU to benefit the very richest in society at the expense of everybody else. It is clear that if they secure a deal or not, they are intent on driving through yet more deregulation, tax reductions for the richest, banks and big corporations, more privatisation, further cuts in paying conditions in an utterly calculated race to the bottom. That is why, after the result of the referendum, Labour is now committed to jobs first on Brexit. This will help and not hinder our mission to transfer power, wealth and opportunity to the many, not the few. We will use powers returned from Brussels, devolved to the most local level possible, to upgrade Britain's economy and create good jobs right across the country. A Tory Brexit means fewer workers' rights, fewer social and environmental protections. The exact opposite of how a Labour Brexit would play out. And we saw that this week in Parliament. We put down motions on protection of universal human rights. We put down motions on environment, on workers' rights, on consumer rights, all the protections that are so necessary in a decent, civilised society. And that miserable majority of Tories and the DUP voted them down. Well, the electorate's coming to get them at the first opportunity we have for what they call. Been international and global in our outlook, and that's why we're leading calls to end British arms sales to Saudi Arabia, which is causing such a humanitarian crisis in Yemen. And our MPs are raising that all the time, as well as raising the appalling situation of the Rohingya people who have been driven out of Myanmar into Bangladesh at the present time. I'm very pleased that one of our MPs, brilliant MP, Rosanna Allen Khan, went there recently and used her skill as a doctor to help some of the people in those refugee camps. But they should not be driven out of their homes. They should not be forced out of their country. We will put all the pressure we can on this, because we must be, as Labour, a leading voice for human rights throughout the world. That's why I have spent a lot of time making sure that despite or because of the Brexit negotiations that are going on, we want to build the strongest possible cooperative relationship with all countries across Europe and all peoples across Europe as we campaign for decent living standards and environmental protections for all, but also respect for human rights in every part of this continent and indeed every part of the world. That surely is what the Labour message is about. It's there in our Constitution. Our respect for the UN, for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and our concerns for the victims of human rights all around the world. We cannot protect our own human rights by ignoring the abuses of human rights that happen in other parts of the world. They are part and parcel of the same agenda. Let's work together for decency and justice all across the world. We're here at Marjon University, one of the many universities in the southwest. They're an excellent example of how a Tory Brexit or a no-deal Brexit will damage our whole society. Universities, along with many other vital sectors in the southwest, such as services in agriculture and tourism, rely on the talent and expertise of staff from the European Union. That's one of the many reasons why Labour would immediately give all European Union nationals who are currently living and working in the UK the knowledge they are welcome here, can continue to call Britain their home, and can bring their families here as well. We have to continue to encourage talent in the UK and must seek to maintain membership of European organisations such as Euratom, the European Medicines Agency, as well, of course, as the very important Erasmus scheme, which gives so many students from all over Europe the chance to get to know each other and get to know each other's societies. This is for the benefit of our universities, but also for our education system as a whole, which we're seeking to expand as we develop a national education service. This is going to be one, I hope, of the great achievements of the next Labour government. A national education service offering education to everybody at any age that is free at the point of use, because we believe education should be a right, not a commodity to be bought and sold. Never do this, claiming that it costs too much money. But what could possibly be more worthwhile than allowing people to get a full education? Giving people these opportunities in their lives must be absolutely central to our socialism and the values that go with it. Making education a right that is available to all, not merely a market commodity. We have to support people right through, from early years, from the age of 2 onwards, all the way up to adult education, and allow people to retrain and upskill at any point they want to in their lives. That's why we start with 30 hours of free early years provision to all 2-year-olds, ensuring that all children get the best possible start in life, irrespective of the postcode where they're born. Schemes such as those in Bristol, started by our brilliant Labour Mayor, Marvin Rees, opening up community breakfast clubs to ensure that no child goes hungry and to provide vulnerable children with enjoyable activities, is exactly the right approach to aiding children's development, benefiting them for the rest of their lives. Because we have to ensure that everybody is included in our society. We have to recognise that in every single one of us, we have something positive to offer, some positive ambition that we want. But all children, all young people, have to get a chance to do that. So it doesn't mean sitting back and letting free market capitalism dictate how our children's education works, how our health service works, or how our whole economy works. It means that we should be there to drive up standards and not use every opportunity to drive them down so that somebody else can make a quick buck out of them. Education for all. That is the Labour message. Brexit to run down our farming and fishing, both of which play a very large part in the economy of the Southwest. So multinational companies can undercut our farmers and bring in knockdown imports from the US and Brazil. If we do not defend farming standards and take bold steps to protect our environment, our whole rural way of life would be under threat. The mixed fisheries we have around the Southwest underline how important it is that after we leave the EU, we have a fisheries policy that supports the industry, creates jobs, it's sustainable and supports exports. The common fisheries policy was not always helpful to fishermen in the Southwest. We need to make sure whatever replaces it works for the Southwest, for the environment for everybody, and creating good quality, properly paid jobs. Because there is so much that was hidden away in this budget. One thing this week was an announcement that there will be no new subsidies for new renewable energy projects until at least 2025. That's a move straight out of the Donald Trump environmental playbook, at a time when we need to be taking bold and brave steps to end environmental destruction and stop rising sea levels, which will have a hugely devastating effect on the whole country, and obviously a region with the largest coastline of any, a big effect here. Unlike the Tories, Labour is calling for the entire body of environmental European Union law and treaty principles to be transferred in its totality into British law after we leave the European Union. Because anyone who's watched Blue Planet 2 has seen just how beautiful, but also how fragile our marine environment is. We will manage them with you, for you, and we'll guard them for the future generations as well. We also want to ensure there is a complete ban on fracking so we can get a strict target of 60% of energy coming from low carbon and renewable sources by 2030. These aren't utopian desires. It's an absolute necessity if we're to preserve our planet for our children and our grandchildren. One of the many challenges which a future government must face, the environmental crisis, the rise of automation in our economy, the social care crisis in an ageing economy and the crisis of the NHS, which is starved of funds, is the housing crisis, caused by a failure of governments to build homes that anyone can call remotely affordable. It's obvious that the current government has answers to absolutely none of these challenges, and you can see that day by day. If you walk around the streets of Plymouth tonight, or any other city for that matter, you will come across a staggering number of desperate, homeless people who've been forced to sleep rough on their streets. Nobody chooses to sleep on the streets on a winter's night. The number of people sleeping rough in Britain has more than doubled in the past 7 years. Homelessness and rough sleeping shames us all. We must end it, and we have no excuse not to. We are still in the middle of a housing crisis. The OBR have acknowledged that the Tories' flagship policy of abolishing stamp duty for first-time buyers is actually going to drive up house prices, benefiting those who already own homes and not the first-time buyers the government claims it was trying to help. This is even more of a problem in the southwest and other areas with large numbers of second homes. The policy falls down because the government has totally failed to build the houses which people need. 3 years ago, they promised to build 200,000 new starter homes, but we're still waiting for the first one to be built. It is why we have to stop leaving it all to the market to magically solve housing problems and get serious about a public programme of house building for everybody, particularly council housing with secure lifetime. During the election, we promised that a Labour government would build 1 million homes, of which half would be council houses or housing associations, to ensure they're genuinely affordable. Combining with giving council the powers to regulate rents, we would be able to finally make progress on this issue, which is currently costing individuals and families thousands of pounds a year. It's the type of investment we need in almost every sector of our economy. I mentioned rail earlier, which has suffered from chronic underinvestment here in the southwest as the Tories continue to fail to commit a single penny in this week's budget. This is why we're totally committed to the recommendations of the Peninsula Rail Task Force. 2.5 billion for badly needed rail improvements, delivering much faster journey times from London and cities like Plymouth and Exeter, unlocking a potential 7.2 billion for the economy as a whole. You invest in transport, you get a payback from the entire economic growth that follows. Currently, the national average for transport spending in the UK is £444 per head. But here in the southwest, you receive £277, 38% less. Bus budgets have been cut by 26% since the Conservatives came to power. Hugely damaging in cities trying to tackle congestion and air pollution, as well as I said earlier, rural communities and potentially isolated seaside towns where people, especially the elderly and the young, rely on bus services as the only form of transport available for them. That's why a Labour government will encourage local authorities to start their own municipally owned bus companies, accountable to local communities and operating where people need them, integrated with rail services. This, combined with the reversal of deregulation, which has savaged rural bus routes across the country, will create a revived rural and urban transport system. Not just run for profit, but run for the social needs of people. It's our ambition to build a fully integrated transport system. Publicly owned railways, upgraded cycling and buses properly regulated so they serve the communities that need them. Under Labour, public transport will be accessible and affordable for people, not for profit. Investment that our economy needs to improve people's lives, their day-to-day lives after 7 years of austerity. This week's budget proved the economy's failings and the government's inability to deal with it. It's clearer now more than ever that new solutions are needed for a new era as neoliberalism and free markets fail to meet people's needs. We cannot go on with poor growth, poor productivity, poor wages and poor living standards. People are realising things don't have to be this way. Inequality and poverty are not inevitable. We, as a party, with well over 500,000 members and millions of affiliated supporters, are a real movement, a real social movement, and Labour can make a huge difference. Today is our National Campaigning Day. We have 600 events on all over the country because our 500,000 members are enthused and excited and want to go out and do things. We've got to organise in every city, town and village in the country, working to win elections, but also working between elections on the campaigns that are so important, standing up for our values, organising campaigns, supporting people in struggle at the workplace and other causes. Making our voice heard and making our beliefs known, because a better society is possible. And people are increasingly believing that under a Labour government, a better society will be delivered. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for all you've done for Labour all across the South End, South West. Stay together, work together, campaign together, and let's win for the good of the people of this country. Thank you.